ons land, dis ons taal. En sonder soek kan ons gaan stories haal. Maar we lewe in die duine, hoog gebou uit sand. Die helder see en die goue strand. Die landskap wat oor generasies vertel. Die harte wat in ritme met die golwe val. Ons land, ons taal.
Goeiemôre, dit is donderdag 7 November. Ek is Francoise Steynberg. Ek en Elvira Hattingh gaan vir julle vertel wat gaan op die voorblaaie aan van Republikein, Namibian en Allgemeine Zeitung. Dan, terwyl dit so sleg gaan in die konstruksiebedryf, gaan Jo-Maré Duddy gesels met Bärbel Kirchner oor volgende week se konstruksieberaad wat brood nodig is in hierdie land om die konstruksiebedryf reg te ruk. Daarna is ons verkiesingsonderhoud. Vandag is dit met die Landless People's Movement. Dan kom Leandrea Louw van Erongo aan die beurt. Sy gesels al die pad uit Swakopmund met ons oor al die kusnies wat in Erongo is. Geniet dit.
Met die golwe val. Ons land, ons taal.
By my is my kollega Elvira Hattingh. Môre Elvira.
Môre Francoise, môre julle.
Ons gaan vir julle vertel wat's op die voorblaaie vandag. Elvira, jy het die storie gedoen oor die hardapdam wat amper leeg is, die hardapboere wat moet afskaal. Dit is verskriklik.
Ja.
Vertel van ons daarvan.
Ongelooflik, Francoise, dis 'n tragedie want nou reeds moet hulle 40% van hulle landerye opoffer om water te bespaar. Nou ons weet daar sou 'n afsny daar is 'n afsnypunt van as die dam se vlakke 4.5% bereik, dan is dit fisies nie meer moontlik om water aan besproeiingsboere te verskaf nie, soos die infrastruktuur van die dam is. Maar ons weet ook die dam is leeg en Mariental moet oorleef van hierdie dam se water.
Ja.
En die maatreël wat hulle nou getref het om 40% landerye op te offer, sal beteken besproeiingsboere se water hou 'n maand langer. Dit sou begin Desember opgewees het, nou dan tot einde Desember. En intussen hulle enigste hoop is reën.
Ja,
dis wat oorbly.
Redding.
Ja.
Is reën.
Ja.
So ons moet bid vir reën.
Absoluut.
Dan nog 'n tragedie. Nadat eergister 'n man sy gesinslede, 3 van sy gesinslede uitgewis het met 'n panga, was daar gister in die noorde nog 'n gesinsmoord waar 'n man sy vrou doodgeskiet het, homself om die lewe gebring het voor hulle 2 kinders.
Dis verskriklik.
Dit hou nie op nie.
Ja.
Ek weet nie. Ja, ons land voel vir my soos 'n bloedbad. Goed, nou gaan ons dan na bietjie beter en positiewe nuus op die Sun se voorblad. Die Ministerie van Finansies se belasting beamptes is besig om belastingontduikers, die wat nie belasting wil betaal nie, se leefstyl audits te ondersoek. So al hierdie mense wat nie belasting betaal nie, maar sulke met groot karre ry en groot huise het en ja,
Hulle word
baie
bedien.
flashy leefstyle het, hulle word ondersoek, wat ek dink dit is fantasties.
Dit is.
Elvira, wat is op die Allgemeine Zeitung se voorblad?
Francoise, hulle kyk vandag na die presidensiële kandidaat Itana, wat dan nou teen president Hage Geingob, Itula,
Ja.
wat teen hom dan nou staan, en hulle oppositiepartye is bietjie kwaad vir hom, want hy het gesê die stryd is tussen hom en Hage, en die res kan maar hulle presidensiële kandidaate onttrek. So baie interessant. Ons sal seker nog hierdie tipe dinge sien tot oor so 3 weke as ons dan nou by die stembus gaan
Ek dink ons gaan nog baie dinge beleef.
Absoluut.
Met die aanloop van die verkiesing.
Ja.
Dankie Elvira.
Plesier. Totsiens.
Met die golwe val. Ons land, ons taal.
Enjoy extra flexibility with ExtraView from DSTV. It lets you pop a TV up here, another over here, and one more up here. And great news, Namibia! You can now link up to 3 ExtraView capable decoders and have the whole family enjoy their favorite shows in 3 different rooms at the same time, all under a single subscription. To find out more, visit dstv.com and enjoy extra viewing freedom for everyone.
Struggles in the construction sector seem to be endlessly. Economic pain for this sector carrying on for more than 3 years now. And to try and mitigate the situation and come up with solutions how to pick this sector up, there will be a massive construction conference next week in Windhoek. In the studio with us to talk about this is Bärbel Kirchner. She is the Consulting General Manager of the Construction Industries Federation. Good morning, Bärbel, and welcome.
Good morning, Jo-Maré. Thank you.
You work with the sector every day on the level in which they operate. How bad is it?
I'm afraid to say it has not improved since 2015, when we have experienced a huge drop, obviously with the moratorium on spending and subsequently with less spending by government on infrastructure development as such. So it is really a very dire the situation. Many of our contractors are still incredibly badly affected, and that is hugely worrying. I mean, if you were to think that in 2015 we had a massive contribution to real GDP, which was 7.2%, and now at the end of last year it's 2.9% in terms of our contribution to the GDP of our country. And if you were to also think that since 2015 until now, the industry is contracting by 12.5% a year. And it was a massive drop immediately after 2015, something like 35% contraction. So that is now 12.5% over the year since 2015. Now, obviously, this has a massive impact on all the businesses in our sector. We have regularly surveyed our businesses, and I think the last survey that we have conducted was in 2017. Since then, it was really a question of how real would the results be, because a lot of people have disappeared from the scene as well. But at the time, we had a response rate of 173, that was in 2017. 173 had responded, of which only 10% said it's business as usual. Now, we don't expect business as usual at the moment, yeah. But 70% had at the time said drastic reduction of overheads and basically really reducing things to a minimum. And another 10% had said they would be closing down and also might have to declare bankruptcy. So essentially 70% said would be downsizing drastically. Now, I don't think that situation has changed very much. If we were to conduct a survey now, a lot of people would no longer be captured in a survey because they would no longer be responding to the survey. If we looked at our membership alone for the CIF, in 2015, we had 480 members. Now we're below 300 members. Now, this is not a question of not providing the service that our members need. It's because these companies most likely would have closed down. Yeah, and perhaps just to also mention that of 48% of our members were SMEs, and now at this stage it's only 24%, which is a very sad development, because most of the smaller businesses are also startups or new entrepreneurs that obviously wanted to venture into business, and so that's a very sad development. But if you also, it's not just the SMEs that are affected, it's also the bigger companies in our industry, the well-established companies. I mean, they would have made huge investment into plant and machinery, and the problem with that is obviously you need to have a reliable turnover to be able to finance that and for it to be feasible as well. So it's very scary, the situation.
It is very scary indeed. And the thing is, the spillover effects are massive, because the sector, if the sector shrinks, then they can't give business to the suppliers. And you have massive employment effect if these businesses start shrinking.
Yeah, the reality is that a lot of people have been retrenched. We had probably since 2015 until now in the formal sector 28% retrenchment, losses of jobs. But it's most likely much more than that, because not everybody is captured in the informal sector as well. And since then, it was about 100 we had about 18,000 that had been retrenched. And you must also consider the multiplier effect,
exactly.
or how many people are affected by that.
So we're talking about 4, more or less. Yeah.
So that is a huge
18,000
impact.
times 4.
Yeah. So a lot of people are affected by that. So I think we obviously need to focus on making changes, and so that we can work towards a better future.
Bärbel, the crux of the problem, obviously the fact that government had to consolidate massively in order to try and get some macroeconomic stability back, so they started cutting spending in 2016. Also a big factor which people don't always realize is the fact that the construction at the 3 big mines ended then, so that also had a massive implication.
That's correct.
But
yes, yeah.
the huge factor, the fact that government didn't or can't pump as much money into development and infrastructure and construction as it previously had. And then obviously very bad news with the midterm budget review, the fact that development budget was cut by yet another $1 billion Namibian. So you have that as a huge problem. What are the other bottlenecks that is causing the sector to struggle so much?
Yeah, I think the situation, just to go back to what you said, I think that's a huge impact for our industry. The limited spending in terms of the capital budget, development budget, or infrastructure development, whatever we might call it. But that means the huge reduction has an impact on our industry. Our industry was hugely dependent on government spending. And also to some extent it had been stimulated to create jobs as well. So, and the change was too drastic at the time. So to diversify in a very short period, that obviously was very difficult for our industry as well. And we cannot say the industry, the construction sector works in isolation. No. It's obviously an integral part of the economy. And we recognize that there are different views about how you can stimulate the sector. Because on the one side we cannot increase the debt to GDP ratio, because there we are warned from by very many analysts as well, and so we need to be very much aware of that. But yet, if we were to consider the money that is being spent in infrastructure development, or in terms of our development budget, there is something. We spoke to several of our contractors. Obviously, we are regularly engaging. And many of them basically said, if we were to spend this money and focused on a local industry, we wouldn't have had this problem that we have now, because the money would have been kept in Namibia. Because now a lot of our finances basically leave the country eventually. So we really need the money in Namibia. We need to support our local businesses. We need to support our local contractors that are Namibian owned. So that we can contribute effectively to the economy, and so it's really the focus on there is sufficient money to support a local industry, and that would then also have a multiplier effect on other sectors as well. And obviously, those that are very closely linked in industry, they would benefit from that too. So we don't want to see further retrenchment by focusing on the industry. Or the local contractors. I think there is an opportunity in there. But also very important, I think, is that we have a National Construction Council. That is so very important. I mean, we've been lobbying for it for years. And it would help us to regulate the industry. Now, on the one side, people say, you don't want to over-regulate in the private sector. But it's critically important in our sector, because with that every contractor that is operational in the industry or in the country doing jobs would have to be registered with the council. With that, you have a degree of understanding about the capacity of the contractor, and you can then also link the size of contractor with the size of project. The industry has got into disrepute with non-completion of projects. Now, I would not say these are our members, because our members have to operate based on a code of conduct.
Yes.
But at large, if there is no regulation, it could lead to the non-completion of projects. But one very important factor is also, then we would not have the question of tenderpreneurs.
Of course.
The middleman or the agent. Because when you are registering with the council, you would have to show that you have the relevant capacity to be registered as a contractor, and that would immediately cut out the middleman as well. Now, they, of course, in turn subcontract to foreign contractors, so it creates the impression that Namibian contractors are largely involved with local projects, and that is not the case.
Yeah. Smoke and mirrors, eh? This council will be one of the focus areas for the annual, or the first annual construction conference that will take place in Windhoek next week. Just to round off our discussion, tell us a bit about the conference, when it will take place, where it will be, etc.
Okay. The conference is on the 14th and 15th of November. The main day is really on the 14th, where it will be held at the Safari Hotel Conference Center. And again, the main focus is really the Construction Council, because we're very glad, that there is commitment from government. That has been expressed at the Economic Summit, that the Construction Council will be promulgated. It will become an act, hopefully by the end of the financial year. So we want to continue focusing on that because it's critically important for our industry. But at the same time, we have also engaged many ministries to look at the opportunities for infrastructure development in various sectors, such as water and agriculture, such as energy, particularly renewable energy as well, in the health sector as well as in the educational sector, because there are opportunities. And we obviously want to raise the awareness that we need to support the local contractors. And one of the issues that is also on the agenda is the question of procurement, and that we look at preferential treatment for local contractors. We have frequently engaged with the Ministry of Finance regarding that. So again, that will be a highlight of our discussion at the conference. And on the date 2, we will have a training, an introductory training on public-private partnerships. Now, this is a concept, or it's a way of financing, essentially, that everybody speaks about. It's a buzzword. It's very important to gain that kind of knowledge. And what does it really entail, PPPs? It provides a source of financing where there is lack of financing, for infrastructure projects or smaller projects, but essentially where the private sector comes with the finance in collaboration with the government or with the authority entity work on the project. So we provide the introductory training. It has a huge interest. We have a lot of people who have signed up for that. And this conference is not only for our members, it's also for non-members. And if anybody is still interested in signing up to attend the conference, if I may, just perhaps to contact us for the details at pr@cifnamibia.com. And so until tomorrow we can still take some bookings for the conference. So I think it would be I think it's also very important that essentially everybody gets together, that we consolidate opinion as well, because you must imagine an industry that is so badly affected. People are very inward focused. They're just basically focusing on survival. On
survival, exactly, yeah.
And they're very much in their businesses. With retrenchments and streamlining, you have practically more than one job to do.
Yeah.
And you're working in the office, on the site. So that's why we have a conference of only 1.5 days, just to focus on the key issues. We hope that it will focus some attention on our issues. But we obviously realize we're an integral part of the economy. And I think what is very important is that we can stay stuck in the past. We can, consider and wonder who's to blame. But at the end of the day, we are all Namibians and we have to move forward. We have to focus on solutions, and, positivity is crucial. I know it's difficult at times, particularly when you sit home alone and thinking about the day, wow, what a day it was. But I think it's critical that we focus on solutions and that we need to find a solution together.
Indeed, a groundbreaking conference
Yeah.
that is going to take place. Thank you to the Construction Industries Federation for taking this initiative, and we wish you the best of luck, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Met die golwe van ons land, ons taal.
Things are really starting to heat up before the 27 November polls. And today we have with us Utara Mutu from the Landless People's Movement. Good day, and how are you?
Good, I'm good. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. And thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, sir.
Hope we can start off just with your party's kind of draw card. What are the draw cards that you're going to be using in the run-up to the elections to attract voters?
Apart from land, I would say that the youth empowerment, which is very evident in our structures. We're the only political party that has a majority of youth being represented on the political list for parliament and also in our structures. I mean, we have youth going from 23 in the national executive. So we are really the epitome of youth empowerment and youth revolution. And that's the major key that we're going to use. We cannot allow leadership, current leadership, to take over and say and give us and represent the youth, because we are the future, and therefore the youth should partake, and therefore LPM is going to represent and should represent the youth. That's what we discussed.
We all know what the country is going through at the moment, Utara, in terms of lack of job creation, the economy and so forth. What are your party's plans to kind of revive the economy, to industrialize, and obviously to create jobs for our people?
We have various policies that we're going to put in place when we win government. The first one is we're going to look at the SOEs. We're going to cut some of them and obviously sell them off to the private sector to get revenue. Secondly, we're going to bring down the cabinet from the existing number to 12 and take such positions such as the vice president will be taken out in deputy ministers to sort of take off that budget that the government has to bring in for the salaries. And then another thing is that we will look into is the SMEs. We'll invest into the SME, creating one that will look into youth as well as the existing SMEs to sort of revive in terms of financial incentives. And another thing that we will look into is the agrarian reform. We will have an entity that will be financing the agrarian reform, because we believe it all starts with agriculture as a base sector for other sectors to develop in the long run. And that's some of the steps that we're going to take and look into.
You've already mentioned the youth.
Yes.
What is your policy on education and specifically young people in Namibia?
Okay. Our policy on education is that we, starting from the principals, will ensure a system that will move away from the ordinary management of schools. We will ensure that principals have to be educated at least with a master's in business administration to help them better facilitate and manage the hostels and the school. And then we'll also look into reforming our education system, where we create an indigenous education where all languages are represented, our history is reformed, and we'll look into creative arts sector modules, sports, as well as gender equality modules. We're also looking to creating free tertiary education to ensure, at least for the first degree, that an individual doesn't have to worry where I'm going to get the money to educate myself. On the youth, we're going to look into youth centers for ideals, and we're going to look into a bank that funds their ideas specifically for the youth. We're going to look into the sports centers, institutions that will help bring the sports and make it more marketable, and also for it to compete on international levels with training facilities in the creative arts sector.
Our people are also suffering in terms of land and housing. What is the LPM's policy in terms of those two very, very critical issues?
While the land has been the very face of the landless people's movement, we are saying that in terms of the urban land crisis, the first thing we're going to do is that we are going to demarcate the land in terms of informal sector, the first 100 days of our administration, where we'll use the GPS system to give this land title deeds to the people, and then to ensure that at least as an individual, you can have your piece of land. And then we'll also look into the rent prices that are really high and try to regulate them as well. We're going to have a case-to-case land redistribution policy cases in terms of ancestral land to really look into the cases. We'll have a policy on what we call the fit to purpose policy in terms of housing, where we will give subsidies for people who are owning houses for the first time, such as graduates, etc., where they're able to at least afford a house for themselves. And then we'll also look into the creating, after the informal settlement, we'll look into the rural settlement, where we'll try and get mass housing projects in order to create a better standards for those people.
Obviously, you guys are the new kids on the block. If you manage to get some seats in Parliament, how would you make government more accountable to the people of Namibia?
All right. Firstly, we will advocate for a reformed ACC. We need to really reconstruct and restructure the whole system by ensuring that we have more investigators being placed, not only being trained through the current policies and training projects that they have, but they are going to have intensive training on how to deal with white-collar corruption and crimes. We're going to ensure that there are other institutions and entities, such as empowering the Ombudsman and that of the Prosecutor General, to not just be prescribing cases to the law, but to the police and all the other entities, but to ensure that they can also be part of the prosecuting process, where they can be the ones to have their final say in the crimes that the individual has had. So we will really force into that. And other ways that we're going to look into is we're going to ensure that there are entities that civil society can also play a role, to ensure that we empower them through financials, empower them through policies, where they can also actively engage in holding the government accountable. And we'll look into the legal reform in terms of perpetrators of this crime, such as corruption, which has been eating on our country. We're going to ensure that the perpetrators will have a life sentence, because we need to be strict on this. It is a growing issue. So we need to ensure that perpetrators will do away from corruption.
Just in terms of some of your critics and detractors who say that the LPM is a one-trick pony, that the LPM focuses exclusively on ancestral land, what do you say to those, the detractors and critics?
Well, it's false. Firstly, as a movement, we didn't just look at ancestral land. We looked at the whole land reform, including land distribution, not on the basis of ancestral land, but that was as a movement. But we were able to prove that by expanding our priorities, such as corruption, agrarian reform, and empowerment, the arts sector, we are able to have an inclusive policies that just don't only speak on land, but speak on all sectors that are affected by specific economic crisis and gender-based violence. We have had policies that speak to that and how we're going to tackle the issue. So it goes beyond just the land question, but really restoring the person's dignity in all aspects.
Mutara, what is your final message to the viewers out there, the potential voters that are going to go and cast their ballots and press that EVM button on the 27th of November? What's your final message to them?
Well, Namibians, voters, you should go out there and vote for whoever stands for your rights. Landless People's Movement has shown that just as a movement, we're able to do things and we're able to advocate and speak for the truth. We are not scared to be persecuted for speaking the truth. We are not scared to ensure that those who have done corruption will be placed in the rightful place that they have to be. You need to vote on basis of policies. You do away from the liberation politics and look at strategies. How can we revive the economy? How do we empower our people, not just our black people, but all races? How do we ensure that our foreigners are protected? You need to look into policies and parties that represent that. And the Landless People's Movement represents all of that and more.
Tara, that was a mouthful and a lot for the voters to think about. Thank you so much for joining us, and it was really a pleasure having you with us today.
All right, thank you.
Ons land, ons taal.
The best in African storytelling presents unforgettable moments in African drama. Wow. The romance.
Will you marry me?
The inspiration. The laughter. And the heated confrontations. Then, just when you think you've seen enough, fiery face-offs, the schemes, and the devastating truth.
What is going on?
The stories never end with homegrown drama, telenovelas, and more. Get connected from as little as $1,499 for an Explorer decoder, Smart LNB, and 1 month's DSTV Premium, Namibia's leading entertainment destination, DSTV.
Goeiemôre aan Leandrea Louw van Erongo.
Hi Francoise.
Môre Leandrea, hoe gaan dit met jou by die see?
Ag nee, dit gaan baie goed hierdie kant. Ons word so 'n bietjie weggewaai van die wind, maar verder dan is ons 100%.
Ag, ek wil tog net spog. Ek het gisteraand 5 mm gehad. Leandrea, wat is nuus daar by die kus?
Gisteraand het ons nou 'n reeks gemeenskaps vergaderinge hier in Walvis Bay gehad in Narrowville en in Kwiesipmond, waar die munisipale raad basically net feedback gegee het oor Farm 37. Alles gaan redelik goed. Die raad het besluit op Farm 37 omrede om vir hierdie mense wat so agter in die shacks in bly en in die garages in bly, om meer vir hulle 'n plekkie te gee waar hulle se eie erf kan kry en hulle se eie huisie kan opsit. So dit vorder goed, die survey is nou op site. Hulle beoog om die kontrakteur by Desember aan te stel en dan by volgende jaar April gaan hulle nou begin met die establishment van die site nou. En dan hopelik oor 'n jaar of so, dan is alles mooi ingewerk, soos die verskeie paaie, die elektrisiteit en die water, sodat kan die mense nou hulle se erfies kom koop en hulle se huisies begin bou. En dan ook op dieselfde tyd in Narrowville gister het die Erongo Regional Council $1 miljoen vir die Walvis Bay shack dwellers gegee. Nou, hulle het so 268 plots gekry, so die geld gaan hulle nog gebruik vir die servicing van hierdie plots. Want dit is daar in die duine en daar aan die agterkant daar by Narrowville, so dit is bietjie moeilik om dit nou net met jou grafie te gaan om nou jou erf nou reg te gaan kry. So hulle het huidiglik net so $1.9 miljoen nou om nou te begin met hierdie servicing, maar hulle se kwotasie staan op $85 miljoen. Soos nogal baie wat hulle moet doen. En dan Walvis Bay gaan een van die dae spog met 'n nuwe hotel hier in die middedorp. Dit is nou net so skuins oorkant F&B in die dorp. Nou die munisipale raad het die toestemming gegee vir hierdie erwe om te verkoop te word. En dan die projek word spesiaal in die sentrale sakekern gedoen om besigheid te bevorder. So die fasiliteit gaan oor 4-ster geriewe beskik, insluitend 'n restaurant, 'n straatbistro, 'n kroeg op die dak en 'n swembad. So dit is nogal fancy, hoor jy, Francoise?
Ja, dit klink baie lekker. Ek sal moet kom kuier by die see.
Definitief. En dan die ontwikkelaar is 'n filiaal van die Iris Groep. Hulle is die maatskappy wat nou tans die Iris Boutique Hotel het en as ook die Raft restaurant. En daarop Swakopmund het die munisipale werkers in die week so 'n bietjie getooi want hulle wil nou al begin met die salarisonderhandeling. Maar die munisipaliteit lyk my sloer nou so 'n bietjie. Maar die werkers het gesê, okay, ons gee vir julle net 3 dae om vir ons 'n antwoord te gee en ons wag en kyk maar nou, want Dinsdag het hulle gestaak en die petisie oorgegee, so by môre sal die 3 dae oor wees. En dis van my kant af, Francoise.
Baie dankie, Leandrea.
Al die kykers kan definitief daar na ons Facebookblad gaan loer en op ons webwerf, en daar is waar al die nuutste nuus van die kus en die Erongo streek gaan wees.
Nou toe, al die kusbewoners, dit is waar julle nuus kry in Erongo.
Met die golwe Ons land, ons taal.
Nou ja, terwyl die Hardapdam so leeg is en die arme boere daar sukkel, al wat ek op hierdie donderdag wil hoor, is donderweer. So kom ons hoop dit reën vandag. Geniet julle dag verder, totsiens.
Want dis ons land.